Well, good morning, afternoon, welcome again. Great to see you all here. Boy, we have a good Sunday crowd in this town, I have to say. We're very grateful to you, as always, for the support and attendance of our friends. It's what makes it work. I'm really here to very briefly, to hand you over to Amanda Wright, who is the clinical director from Fairwinds Counseling Service, who is sponsoring this event for us, one of our wonderful community organizations. And she is going to give an introduction for Kyleigh Leddy, who is going to be in conversation with Mindy Todd, who is a producer and host of WCIA's The Point. WCIA is one of our most valued and most steadfast sponsors. So we have a house full of good supporters already. So, Amanda.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Amanda Wright, and I'm the clinical director at Fairwinds Nantucket's Counseling Center. I'm honored to be asked to introduce Kyleigh Leddy, the author of The Perfect Other, the story of her beloved sister. As someone who lost a loved one to suicide as well, this was not an easy read, but very powerful. It's a wrenching, detailed account of her beloved older sister's descent into mental illness and the challenges she faced getting the proper diagnosis and the help that she needed. Despite that, she ultimately died by suicide. This book helps to reduce the stigma of mental illness and demonstrates the impact mental illness has not only on the individual, but also the family. Anytime we lose a loved one, whether it's suicide or illness, there are many stages of grief: sadness, anger, and guilt. As you will see in this book, she and her family struggled with grieving the loss of her sister and eventually came to the realization that only after we relinquish what is lost, we are truly healed, and this is the true meaning of rest in peace. Please know that Fairwinds is here to help anyone on this island. We offer many services. I so appreciate Kyleigh sharing this story about her sister and know that it will help so many. Please welcome Kyleigh.
So, Kyleigh, I want, the book starts out on a very happy note, and I'd like to start there too, because this is important to the story. Your sister really willed you into existence, right? I mean, after you write about that in the book. She wanted a sister so bad. So talk a little bit about what it was like being the younger sister of Kate when she was young.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I also want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you for interviewing, and thank you to Amanda for introducing this event and for all the work that you do for the island. Amanda was actually my boss for like a day. I was a therapeutic mentor at Fairwinds one summer, and I was leaving as she was coming in, so this is all the more special. And yeah, that's a great question. I really do feel like my personality was formed in a sense by being a little sister. I think that younger siblings have so many tendencies that are, kind of funny and quirky. Like, I definitely looked up to my sister, I followed after her footsteps. She was the person who I modeled my worldview off of for so many years, and she really was my idol. And there is no one more deserving to be followed after. So yeah, no, definitely. I think that this book really, as in part, a story just about sisterhood in general as well, beyond everything else, because I think that's such an interesting, complex, and important relationship.
Yeah. And you talk about just how important those early years were for both of you. And I want you to tell us a little about your mother, who I know is here, because you say, we could be anything, but we were nothing if we were not kind. Your mom seemed, she very strong woman, right? So tell us a little bit about your mom.
Yeah, I'm not going to look at her when I say this, because she's gonna feel, no, she's crying. Okay, no, absolutely. And, going off of the sisterhood thing, I think that for me, this is also a book about women and female relationships. And, our mom set the best role model for us. And I think that we had those values instilled in us, that was the most important thing. And, I think that, my sister kind of went forward into the world, as did I, knowing that we had that love and support, and it emboldened both of us. And yeah, she's the best. I'm not going to look at her.
Yeah. So tell us a little about Kate's personality in your younger years. She seemed a little kind of rambunctious, out there, just want to get out in the world. Tell us a little bit about her personality.
definitely rambunctious. That's a great word choice. You know, she was hilarious, outgoing, just bold. You know, she had the best fashion sense of anybody I know. Just would try anything, just so much fun. And I think that when I was writing this book too, a big part of me really wanted to honor her personality in her life before mental illness, as well as during it, and to try to establish this person. And I wanted people to fall in love with her. So I really hope that comes through too, because, you know, she really was worthy of that kind of admiration and love.
Absolutely. She started to get into a bit of trouble, right? And even when you read the book, I can see in hindsight, maybe people go, well, why didn't we know? Or why didn't we see this? But a lot of the stuff that she was doing, which could have been some signs to mental illness, were also things that kids just do, right? So when you were looking back, was that a difficult part to kind of deal with in the book? Like, how much of it was just kind of being a rambunctious preteen teenager, and how much of it might have been more?
Yes, definitely. There was a point when I was looking at titles of the book where I was thinking, like, I was just calling it, like, retrospect, because the whole book is me really looking at the past and trying to find, you know, any kind of signs or symptoms that weren't clear before. And for my sister, you know, a lot of the things that made her such a vibrant, interesting, and lovable personality, just being rambunctious and bold and being adventurous, also got her into some trouble. So I think that there was that line between teenage rebelliousness and having, you know, the beginning of a mental illness or some kind of more serious trouble. And I still struggle, even now with the book done, of trying to find a definitive point. You know, I think that it was, even now I think that there's so many things that you could draw from that might not be accurate. So I think maybe the writing suffers from the lack of definition, but I wanted to be honest and true. And I think that families who are suffering from these struggles, you know, it's not that clear. Right. If there was a clear point, it'd be a lot easier, but it's really not.
And I think that's really important, how you're saying you wanted this to honor your sister and let us know who she was before mental illness, because there are many, many families who struggle with this. And I think when you're going through it, sometimes you think it's just your family, right? Because you're not really, you know, open about it at the time. So your sister started to get into some fights. That's probably where the more serious troubles started to come in. And when did it get, I think you were 11 when it became clear you couldn't have friends over anymore? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think she was, so we have a 6-year age gap, so she was around like 17, 16 when I think things got, you know, probably more dicey. You know, but I think it still was really unclear. She had also suffered some traumatic brain injuries, some falls, some concussions, and she had the major concussion and traumatic brain injury when she was 18 or 19, a freshman in college. So I think that's kind of when I would say, if I had to put a moment on it, 1,000 things got to be, you know, really difficult. Kind of, that was when it became outside the realm of this is a normal teenage experience and this is something more serious. But even then, you know, I don't know. I don't know the exact moment. So, yeah, but I think that what you're talking about there too is me growing up in that age where these things aren't easy to explain. You know, I'm still here at 25 with, you know, in this book, still being unable to say a definitive point. So I think when you're 11, you're going through these like confusing, tumultuous moments. You know, you can't confide in your friends, or maybe you can, but it's hard. And it's hard when you don't have something you can come to people and say, you know, this is a diagnosis that you can understand, or it's my sister is struggling with cancer, or she has something that I can tell you. It's, you know, mental health isn't like that, and that's what makes it so hard.
Yeah, and you didn't have a diagnosis at that point at 11,
No.
So you didn't know. But I'm wondering, you know, when Amanda was saying it doesn't just impact the person, it impacts the family, you used to put a chair under your doorknob of your bedroom door so that she couldn't get in. That, you know, I'm just thinking of the trauma from your experience. You're a kid. You don't really understand at this point what's going on, but there does come a point where the fights with your parents and things like that, where you go, this is scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a scary time.
Yeah. No, I think that it's the hardest thing in the world to watch someone that you love transform. into somebody else and someone you can be afraid of. I mean, I think that's the hardest thing. And for me, I think mental illness doesn't just, take away from the person, takes away from your relationships. It drains everything. And in those moments, and even now, writing the book and talking about the book, it's so important to me to kind of establish the difference between the person and the illness they're struggling with.
Yeah.
This is not an indictment of my sister, this book. This is an indictment of schizophrenia, mental illness, and, I think that it can be so easily sensationalized, and it's so easy to reduce someone's humanity. So that's something that I really want to stress, and I hope people get out of the book.
Yeah. Talk about when you did get the diagnosis of schizophrenia. So, because earlier people said, no, she's fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when did that diagnosis come?
I honestly don't even know if I can pinpoint an exact moment. I think it was definitely after the head injury that we were getting those diagnoses. But even then, even towards the end, we didn't have a total, people were still, oscillating between that and bipolar disorder. I mean, it wasn't like we had this one solution that was that. Looking back, I can tell she had hallucinations and delusions, and that those were becoming more active and more disruptive to her daily life as it kept progressing. But it's such murky water.
Yeah.
Again, it makes for a hard narrative book, but that's the truth.
Yeah. So you tried, I think because there was all this drama and things happening around, you wanted to be the kid who didn't create any trouble, right? So you tried to do well in school, be a good kid. And you had teachers saying, boy, you're nothing like your sister, right? What was that like, that pressure of feeling like you have to, get good grades and be this good kid?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wasn't always perfect. But yeah, I think that, teachers would say to me, you're nothing like your sister. And even at that point in my life, I knew she was struggling so much, there was a part of me that took that kind of as an insult. I wanted to be like my sister still. I still admire her to this point at 25. I still look up to her in a sense. So, part of that was just genuinely a difference in personality as well. I'm much more reserved and quiet. My sister is much more, adventurous and bold and outgoing. So that's part of the, I think, answer to that question. And the other half of it, I think, is also that a lot of families struggle, I think, when one sibling is really going through something and they get all the attention, the other child doesn't. And that's a very common issue with, everything from childhood cancer to mental illness. I mean, that's always a struggle. I think that with my family, my mom was extremely aware of that, and she gave me a lot of attention and a lot of time to talk about myself. And we would come home, after school every day, and we'd sit in the driveway for an hour, and I would just tell her about my day. Mm-hmm. And having that kind of attention, that love, not needing to act out to get attention myself, I think is what,
Right.
Really kind of saved this story from going a different direction.
Yeah, I get that reading the book too, that there became this closeness. It didn't drive you apart, it brought you closer together. Let's talk about the head injuries. She had a couple head injuries. The first one was one that was pretty severe, right? So tell us about the two head injuries that you write about in the book.
Yeah, the one I talked about in the beginning was just, more of a concussion that we weren't sure.
She
nothing
jumped
really
out the
happened.
window to go
Yeah.
hang out with her friends.
She was trying to sneak out, and she fell out the window. But that wasn't really we didn't go to the hospital. She didn't need any kind of treatment for that. That wasn't a big moment. But looking back, you can try to add up the numbers and think maybe that contributed to something. But the major head injury happened when she was a freshman in college, and she fell. Some guy hugged her, and she fell off this stoop and hit the concrete, and she cracked her skull, and she had staples, and it was a much more serious head injury where she was hospitalized for a while.
Yeah.
And I think that even that moment, the doctor said to us, when she wakes up, she's not going to be the same. And we didn't know what that meant, and he didn't either. And I still don't know what that means exactly, but I think head injuries are just such a huge under-discussed topic. And
Right.
I think there's a stat that says that more than half of the homeless people have head injuries too, and traumatic brain injuries. So all these things contribute to these societal issues that people aren't really connecting those dots yet.
Well, and CTE, chronic traumatic encephalitis, concussions. We look at the football players, right? We're learning in this research about brain injuries, and they can create behavioral changes like suicidal thoughts, aggression. And there was another interesting aspect in the book that you wrote about, which was polycystic ovary syndrome. I had never heard of that before, but in your research you found that it is linked to schizophrenia and bipolar. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's like a hormonal disorder that happens in the teenage years usually, starts developing. And it's just another statistic that I found that was linking these things. But, it, again, the point in the book I think that is difficult is that, I can look for all these things, and I can say, I know what it was the PCOS, and that contributed to that, and that's a hormonal disorder, and that made this, or it was the head injury. And I think all those things are probably true, and maybe we had a perfect storm coming our way, or maybe it was Lyme disease. We're in Nantucket, which is Lyme capital, and that contributes to a lot of mental illnesses as well. There's so many inflammation and brain inflammation. There's so many things that we can draw, these conclusions from, and I don't know which one it was. Yeah. So I think that my point in trying to write those points down without drawing conclusive, solutions was just trying to give families who read it these other things they can go off of. Maybe that will help somebody else who is going through that and who has that diagnosis. But yeah, it's really confusing.
Yeah, I know it is.
Yeah.
So the other thing going on is your father didn't believe in mental illness. That had to be very difficult.
Yeah, that's definitely a point that was hard. But I also think saying I don't believe in mental illness makes it sound like it's like a fairy tale. Like you can't not believe in it. It's not Santa Claus. But I think maybe more it was like there's just so much confusion around it, like I'm saying now.
Like
so it's
just
like
denial.
And there's such a spectrum to it.
Yeah.
So they're saying you have anxiety or you have debilitating anxiety. There's so many. It's really complicated, and I don't think that it's as easy as just like saying I don't believe in something.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think in recent years we've learned a lot about trauma and trauma's impact on us, throughout our lives, and the body doesn't forget trauma. And so I thought about that when I was thinking about you writing and speaking about this book. Is it difficult for you? Do you feel? Was this more, a healing thing, or are you still reliving some of this?
Yeah. One of my favorite books is The Body Keeps the Score, which really talks about this.
Right.
But definitely, I think that people would tell me when I was writing the book, like, this must be so cathartic for you. And I would get kind of agitated by that. I'd be like, it's super not cathartic. By the way, it sucks. So I think that the process and reliving it and trying to make meaning and beauty and sense from it was so much harder than just living through it and trying to survive day by day. But I also feel like looking back now, having the book out there, it is cathartic. And you might think that this is something I've always been open about since I'm on this little stage right now talking about it, the microphone. But I went to college and I didn't even tell my friends I had a sister. I said I was only child. This was a very, very deep secret almost. And there's a lot of shame there and a lot of stigma I was facing. So the way this book came about essentially was that when I was a senior in college, I won the New York Times Modern Love essay contest. And that was a piece I wrote about technology and grieving, and essentially how having Facebook and Instagram and the way we're documenting our lives so casually and kind of almost carelessly, we're creating these digital memorials for ourselves and for our loved ones. And we don't really have the, measures in place right now to really, I guess, dictate what is right and wrong there. And there's a lot of moral grays. And what's too much holding on and what's too much letting go. So that was my essay, and it wasn't about mental illness at all. It was just about that, and even that was terrible, just so hard to write and have it out there. But when I won the contest, and that was a 0.01% chance of winning that, it was just insane. I had the opportunity to write this book. I kept thinking about the stigma and the shame I felt, and kind of thinking about my fears. So what was I so scared about having this out there? What were people going to think about me differently? Were they going to think that, I have a higher likelihood chance of developing schizophrenia or mental illness, which, statistically I do. And would that scare people away? And for me, it was looking at what was so scary to me and saying, like, that's BS. Like, I shouldn't be afraid of this. It's not right. This is something that families are going through, and, I think trying to put this book into the light of day and say, like, I'm not ashamed. This is our story, and it's hard, and it's complicated, and at times it's ugly, but trying not to, get too afraid of that I don't go through with it.
It does a lot for stigma, and we know stigma with mental illness is huge. How did you get beyond that? Because I'm sure there are a lot of families going, I'd love to be able to do that. How did you do that? How do you get beyond that, worrying about the stigma?
I know I still struggle with it, like, I'm 25 and I'm single, so. So, I'm dating around New York City, and I have this book out there now, and my whole life story essentially is out there, and people can look that up. And it's like increased vulnerability with everyone immediately. And that can be really scary.
It's very brave of you to write this book.
Thank you.
I mean, very brave. I'm wondering, what's the reaction been like from the people who know you? Like you said, you had college friends who had no idea that this was going, that you even had a sister. What's been the reaction from the folks that are close to you who've read the book?
I think it's been interesting because I wanted people to read the book who are close to me, obviously, but I didn't want them to treat me differently. I think that I'm a pretty fun person. I think I have a lot of lightness in my life. I didn't want this to be like this incredibly heavy thing that changed all my relationships. So to my friends and family's credit, I think they've been able to take it in stride and acknowledge how hard it was without kind of making it everything.
Yeah.
My roommate is in the audience right now. I can't see her really because I'm blinded by the light, but
That's a good thing.
yeah, no, I know it's a good thing. But even like we went on vacation this year and she was reading it next to me, and I was like, "Hey, no, don't read that next to me. Can't do that." So I wanted to help the people that need the help, and I hope that it still isn't the only defining moment of my life, because I think I'm much more than this book.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about toward the end of your sister's life. She was having hallucinations, right? What was she was living alone at this point, right? That last day, before she disappeared, your mom just didn't, she knew something was, she didn't know what it was, right? But she just knew something was wrong.
Yeah, and I really didn't have that feeling personally. Like we were so used to having so many events and problems, and that it was kind of like average to me. Didn't think anything was really going on. I think one thing too you mentioned with the hallucinations that is also kind of important to mention is a lot of these hallucinations, these illusions, it's like the sensory information that's coming in that is accurate, and then it gets kind of banged around. There's a doctor that explained it as a ping pong machine, so it's like there's truth to it, and that's what gets to be kind of confusing too.
Yeah.
Like one of the things that was bothering my sister at the time was that there was tiled floors in the apartment building she was at, and she kept saying, it looked like a swastika, and the building's owned by Nazis, and she got this delusional, paranoid hallucination from it that she was kind of overcome by. But when you looked at the floor, it wasn't a swastika, but it was a similar shape. Like there's enough truth.
There's a bit of truth to it that,
yeah.
like you're saying, in the brain sort of distorts.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which I think also makes it confusing and more difficult.
So tell us, your sister was last seen on the Benjamin Franklin Bridge. We don't know. We don't know what happened. I mean, we assume she jumped from the bridge, but her body was never found. That's like, that lack of closure has got to be so tough. I mean, the grieving process for you and your family was really tough.
Yeah, it sucks. I think that grief, I say in the book, grief is never a closed case. So I think that when you lose somebody, inevitably, your mind will jump to any kind of your own delusional thinking, or, as Joan Didion calls it, magical thinking, to say, maybe something else happened. And with our case, because we didn't recover a body, and we didn't have that kind of, concrete closure, that feeling of grief was just exemplified. It was just everything was just like made to be so much more blown out. So, and I think you want to believe that something else happened. Yeah. So I think that kind of just delayed my own healing process, and it took time to really accept it.
Yeah. So talk about that grief process and how your family, I mean, when did you stop thinking that, well, maybe she's still going to come back?
You know, I don't know. I don't know exactly when I kind of gave that up. The essay that I wrote for the New York Times I was talking about earlier, part of the point of it was that, you know, I would text her phone number or I would call her and I always had that kind of hope that maybe one day she's going to answer. And you know, in the essay I talk about how I think I was like a sophomore in college and I was at a bar, underaged. But so I was in the math there. I was like, shoot, sophomore. Anyway, I was at a bar, and you know, I was like, my sister's favorite song came on, and I wanted to text her. So I just texted her, and you know, at this point, she'd been passed away for several years. But I just sent her a text like, thinking of you, and I got a reply, and that was, you know, very startling. And the person just said like, who is this? And I had never received a reply before. And I went to the bathroom, you know, and I kind of like, I was just like shaking, and I called the number, and you know, you have all that hope, you know, maybe it is her, maybe something did happen. Like at that point, I'd accepted the past, but you know, it's still there's that shred of being like, no, there's a possibility here. And I called the number, and it was a different woman, and she, you know, the phone number had been given away because it's been so many years now sitting idle. So that was a moment for me in a sense that was closure. Like I think that was the last time I ever reached out to her, you know, through you know, social media or Facebook or texting. That was the last moment I really like had that hope that she was going to answer someday. So I think that there's tons of moments like that. You know, I think that grieving is an active process, and I like to think that I'm on the other side of it, but I'm not sure any of us ever are.
Yeah, exactly. You also felt some guilt. You had a birthday party planned, and you didn't invite your sister. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so my sister passed away 3 days before my 17th birthday. So I had been planning a birthday party, and I didn't tell her about it because she wasn't doing well at the time, and I didn't want her to be upset. I didn't want her to come to the party and be disruptive or have it trigger her. So, yeah, it was, I think that, you know, there's guilt there, obviously, but there's so much more guilt. I think, you know, I say in the book, like, guilt is like the second cousin of suicide. I mean, it's the same thing. You know, there's no way, even if it's unfounded, there's no way not to have regrets when something like that happens.
A couple of times in the book, where you were asking, wanting to be able to tell you it's not your fault, and I thought, why would you think that was your fault? You know, and again, that points to it's the disease, right? But you had those feelings.
Yeah, I think that it's impossible to have someone you love, you know, suffer this way and commit suicide without having those feelings. I just don't think it's possible, and I don't think it's founded. I think I can look back now and say, I did my best, you know, and I can't torture myself with it, and none of us should or can, but I think that's the most natural feeling in the world, unfortunately.
Yeah. I know you probably have questions. I'm going to go to questions a little early because I'm sure people have questions out here. Does anybody have a question, or should I just keep going? Yeah, go ahead.
I haven't read the book, but there's family history, so I'm familiar with adult onset. Was she ever hospitalized strictly for the schizophrenia
Did you get that question? I couldn't hear all of it.
Yeah, I did. It was a great question. It was about if there was a history of being hospitalized and about medications. And I think you did a great job there describing it as a roller coaster, and it definitely was that. Lots of ups and downs. We definitely had hospitalizations. We tried group homes. We tried a lot of different solutions. And she was on medication at the time. You know, one of the things that I was actually talking to my mom recently about was there's so many things that aren't, safety nets that aren't in place right now. So like when you leave the hospital, I think it should be mandated that you have, you know, enough medication for like 10 days. Because sometimes they let you leave the hospital, and then you have to go to the drugstore and get your medication. I mean, there's so many things like that we don't really have in place right now.
Right.
And that could and probably should be changed. But yeah, definitely we try. I think we honestly tried everything. So yeah.
And some, you know, different medications have different side effects.
Yes.
And something works, and for some people it doesn't work for others. It's difficult. I thought, right back there.
I have a question about the book writing process. Specifically, when you were planning the book, given editor, whoever it might have been, how you're going to structure it, because I know in the beginning, like you said, it was very vivid, and then you got a lot of research.
Yeah. The question is about the first book and how you chose an editor, and go ahead.
Yeah, that's my roommate, you guys.
Okay.
She's asking a question she knows the answer to. I tortured that poor girl. But yes, definitely I think I really wanted to put a lot of research into the book, and as much as possible that could be helpful to families. But I also didn't want it to be so heavy on the science that it was, not as engaging, or that it was taking away from the human elements of the story. So I really tried to intersperse it throughout and try to integrate it. I hope that worked. I still think it's a little rocky. But yeah, definitely wanted to really have the joy and the love come through as well. We're talking here about it, and it's obviously a very heavy subject, and people have told me it's not an easy book, which, you're kind of like, thanks. But I really also wanted it to have moments of joy, and I wanted it to have light in it. And I wanted people to really get my sister's personality from it and love her, as well as understand this larger societal issue.
I wonder if you can talk a little bit about after she went missing and you go to her apartment and what it was like.
Yeah, I think that we went to her apartment trying to figure out what happened, because we didn't know, at this point she had just disappeared. So we were just trying to put together the past and look for what could have been happening at that moment. It's definitely not an easy thing.
And it wasn't, it was disheveled, there was, and there were notes, you went through a lot of the notes and things. So do you have a sense of what she was feeling at that time or thinking?
I think she was just really tired. I think she was really tired of fighting, and I think she really wanted to get better, and I think she was losing hope that things would change. And, I think that unfortunately, with these severe mental illnesses, there's not a lot of ready solutions. So even looking now, with almost 10 years of change, I don't know if I could have told her, like, the society is gonna get there yet for you. I don't know if the stigma is still there. I don't know if the medications are better. I don't know if we really have treatment places. So I think that she just was fighting so hard, and I think that at that moment she just was tired of fighting.
Other questions out here? Yeah, right here in front.
I was thinking about how, because of the mental illness, it's sort of like you lost her twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the time she
Yeah.
died, you already lost.
I had that same thought reading the book, that you lost her twice. You lost her to the mental illness, and then you lost her when she died.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's a great point. I compare in the book schizophrenia a lot to Alzheimer's, because, you're losing people in these slow, insidious ways. And sometimes it's harder when that person comes back for a moment, or it seems like everything is normal, because it's going to happen again, and you're going to lose them again. So it is lost several times. And then you have the final loss, then, like grief, you keep losing, in a sense.
Other questions out here? Okay, go ahead.
Going way in the back.
Yep.
So as you're going through your life and knowing that mental illness can be genetic and can go through family lines, are you hypersensitive now about how you're feeling certain days, or what affects you, or do you get kind of scared or anxious about like little things that bother you now, thinking about what your sister went through, and then what could your what if that happens to me, or how does that affect your life now?
Yeah, so the question is, having lived with that, with mental illness, if you're super sensitive to it now, in your own life and people around you.
Yeah, that is a great question, and I think that I spent a lot of my young adult life worrying this is going to happen to me too, and looking for signs and symptoms and really thinking about it. And for one thing, I've been extremely sensitive about head trauma. My head is like the most precious thing to me, and I you know that is the one thing that I'm like, break my arm, not touch my head. That's one thing that's definitely changed. But I also, I say in the book at some point, and I think in the acknowledgement section, that writing this book, I do think of it as an act of bravery and courage, and I really did try to do it for others, and I did it for my sister, but there's a part of me that did it for myself as well. You know, let's say something should happen to me, you know, or let's say something should happen to my kids. It is genetic, like if I have a kid who suffers from this, I think that you can sit back and, you know, be a lot easier to not talk about this publicly, but, you know, is that really going to change anything? So, yeah, there's definitely a part of me that still worries about it. And I just hope that if something should ever happen to me or someone I love, that the world is a bit more of a welcoming, understanding place.
Other questions? We'll go here, and then Amanda will go to you. Go ahead.
Are you going to continue to write, and if so, what will your subjects be?
Will you continue to write, and what will your subjects be?
Thank you. That's a great question. I'm definitely going to continue to write. I've wanted to be a writer since I was like 6 years old, before I could really read. So it's my dream come true in that sense. And going forward, I am writing about happier, lighter subjects. I'm working on a novel right now that's fiction. I actually, before writing this book, I really kind of wrote a lot of satire, so it's totally different, obviously.
Right, yeah.
But I do want to, you know, have that humor and that joy, and still talk about serious things that matter to me, but not quite this heavy and personal.
Did you get that when you were pitching the book, that, oh boy, I don't know, this, I mean, did you have people turn you down because it's a sad story, or did they take it right away? What was that process?
Yeah, so I did get really lucky because of the Modern Love essay contest in the New York Times. I had agents reach out to me pretty immediately, so I was interviewing different agents, talking to them, and then I signed with them like right after graduation, and then with WME, my current agency, and then we went to market that fall. So I wrote like 80 pages that summer of a draft, a proposal, went to market, shopped it around, and I had 3 offers. We had like a small bidding war, but we definitely got a lot of rejections. And yeah, and I think that in that process, I also, in the publishing industry, changes a lot, and I changed publishers 3 times since signing the deal because of acquisitions and mergers. So every time you get a new team, you have to kind of re-pitch the book and, you know, get people on board again and get them excited about it again. And yeah, I don't know if everyone totally gets it, and I do think it's heavy, and it's hard enough to get people to sit down and read a book, let alone a really heavy book. So it's still something that I think I'm like fighting about, and fighting for, and I think I just still want it to matter.
Go ahead, Amanda.
So I just wanted to ask you, now that you're a master's level social worker, congratulations.
Thank you.
I just wondered if you could share with the audience, just from a clinical lens, like, what did you find helpful for yourself, for your family going through this? And what would you recommend other people to do?
All right, so this is from a clinical lens, what you found helpful and what you'd like to see change.
Yeah, so I just graduated from Columbia with my MSW in May. It's like 2 months ago now, 1 month ago. So I am finally done with that degree, but I really wanted to have that background behind me to have some more formal education to talk about these issues and not just from personal experience. And for me, I think that one thing that I kept coming across in my clinicals and in my classes was that this is kind of common. That's one thing that really struck me when I was writing the book, because you think of it as such a silent, stigmatized subject. When you talk to people, I think people have like 1 or 2 degree separation from somebody who suffers from something similar. So I definitely felt that when I was, studying, and I also felt like, a lot of the signs and symptoms and the experiences, like the roller coaster, all those things are also really common, and there's a lot of similarities. So that kind of encouraged me when I was writing that, I'm not alone. I don't necessarily know everybody who's going through this, but I know that other families are going through this. And now, having come through the other side of it and been published, and I've had just so many families reaching out to me and telling me about their own stories, and how similar they are, or the moments they're different, or how they differ. And it just showed me, like, this is really, it might seem like it's a smaller subset of the population, but I'm just not sure it is.
You did something that I think a lot of people who lose a loved one, and you wish you could have that conversation you didn't have, they seek out psychics. You did the same thing.
Yes, there's definitely a little spiritual woo-woo element too, yeah.
Tell us what that experience was like.
Yeah, so-
You were
yeah.
hoping to get, and what you actually got from that experience.
Yeah. I think that, it's, again, probably part of grieving is innately just seeking answers and seeking connection. And for people who maybe have formalized religions to fall back on, there's that element. For us, I didn't really have a formal religious doctrine that I adhere to. So I was really just hoping to contact my sister maybe and hear from her and hear that she was okay and just, have that connection. And the prologue of the book opens up with that experience of me in college going to a psychic and trying to connect to my sister. And the woman essentially told me, which I'd never been to her before, it was a random woman in near Boston College, and she said, "You have to stop going to psychics." And she was like, and I was like, "Oh, shoot." But she was like, I know you're seeking this out, and I know you want to connect to somebody who passed away, but you have to stop. Like, they're okay, they're at peace, it's time for you to move on and to, let that go. And, that's pretty striking advice from a psychic. Like, it sticks with you. You think they're going to be like, sell you a crystal or something and tell you to keep coming back. But she was like, get out of my face.
Wow.
So I didn't really go back after that.
Okay, I see a hand up back here.
Like being in college and living your college life and then dealing with this and being sort of in two different worlds, trying to navigate that as well as like be quiet.
Yeah. So you're asking how did she navigate the two different worlds, doing the book and being in college? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, sorry, just to clarify, do you mean more like the process of writing the book itself in graduate school, or going through the, yeah.
College student.
Yes.
And, everything that goes with being a kid and being a college student, having fun and all of this, and then having this concern about what happened to my sister and how do I not tell anybody, but it's still in my mind, or I'm still going to parties or doing this and that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Thank you for that. So, yeah, just to reiterate it, the question is, what was the process of going through these experiences as I was also trying to go to college and be a normal teenager and whatnot. And I think that for me, again, it was, I really didn't want to be defined by just this, and I still don't. So as a result, I really kept quiet about it for a long time, as I said before, until the opportunity to write the book came about and the essay. And I think that for me, it was, and it still is, like, it still is striking to me that everyone we know is probably going through something that they're not saying upright, and you would never know about it. And there's more extreme examples of that, and there's less extreme examples of it. But I think that we all kind of contain multitudes, and that we can all be joyous and fun, and we can also all suffer and have a lot of hidden sorrows. And I think that I had a lot of shame and stigma about keeping quiet about that and trying to project a sense of myself to the world that was just one thing, which to me was just like a very normal teenager who's trying her best in school and going to college and having fun and keeping this all quiet. And now it's kind of me trying to merge the two and acknowledge that we all have duality in our lives, and we all have pain, and we also all have a lot of love and happiness.
Good reason not to judge people. You don't know what they're going
Yeah.
through, right? Be kind, be nice. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead, right back here.
Did you find that the system, you're obviously your sister is in touch with a lot of doctors in this process. Did any of these professionals try and give you ideas to help you as a family through this?
Did any professionals give you ideas on how to deal with that at the time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question too. They definitely, I think, suggested it, but it's also it's really hard and difficult to afford a lot of these treatments, and to tack on individual therapy for every person in the family and family therapy is a whole other ordeal too. But I do think, looking to the future, that's something that should be really highlighted. I do think it's really important that the family members are also getting support, and they are getting psychoeducation, and they're being told what's actually going on and how to help. And also that, you can't save somebody when you're suffering yourself. So you need to make sure that, the caretakers, the parents, the siblings also have those supports in place. So that's definitely something that I would like to keep being encouraged.
I know you're still touring with this book, but have you thought ahead? Have you started on your next project yet? You have? Okay.
Yes, I started a novel. It's been really fun. I was writing a collection of essays I'm kind of putting aside for my third book, hopefully, because this second book kind of just took me the story, and the characters came to me really naturally. And yeah, I've been working on it every day. I haven't worked on it in 5 days, so I'm super anxious about it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Been here.
I've been here.
At the book festival, right?
Which is a huge honor.
Yeah.
No, I've been, there's a teacher of mine used to say in college that, he could go a day without writing, the same way he could go a day without laughing, but it wouldn't be a very good day. And I do feel that way still.
So are you disciplined enough to sit down? Do you sit down at a certain time every day? What's your process?
Yeah, I'm a pretty anal person. So I'm kind of wake up, grab coffee, and I clock in a couple hours. Right now, I'm trying to get myself this summer to really finish this next book and give it my all.
Yeah. Right. Well, Kyleigh, very brave, I think, to do this, and I'm so sorry that you lost your sister.
Thank you.
But I think you do a great job honoring her in this book, and really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.